long short-term memory networks, a type of recurrent neural network, which is well suited to establish sequence and time-series data. This type of network can learn long-term dependencies between time steps of a sequence using deep learning device. But in this study, we are not interested to use machine learning techniques or this long short-term memory networks analysis. We don't want to use them, we want to use fractal geometry. When we want to talk about the fractal geometry, we need to know about power law process. So in statistics, a power law is a functional relationship between two quantities, where a relative change in one quantity results in a proportional relative change in the other quantity. It is independent of the initial size of those quantities. One quantity can vary as the power of another one. Power laws describe scalar relationship between two quantities that can be written as this form. Here A is the constant and K is the exponent of the power law. And the relationships are in power laws appear as straight line in this form, which are not plotting like plots. This is a period of equations in this form, in this life form, upon the transformation, which is in the same form as the equation for a line. So we are going to see this form for representation of power law features of our data. Unlike fractals, which deal with self-similar geometrical objects, power laws characterize the scale invariance of the multivariate relationships of frequency distribution for this descriptive attributes of different phenomena. Let's talk about fractals. This is fractal geometry. A fractal, in a very simple word, is a never-ending pattern. Fractals are infinitely complex patterns that are self-similar across different scales. And they are created by repeating a simple process over and over again in an ongoing feedback loop. The term fractal was coined by Mandelbrot in 1970. Fractal geometry can be used to describe irregular and fragmented patterns in nature. In fact, fractal geometry presents a mathematical model for most of the complex phenomena, such as coastline, mountain, cloud, and fracture patterns. And one may think that fractals are only the result of a simple mathematical calculation, but the most interesting point is that many things in nature, they have fractal properties in them. What is self-similarity? Self-similarity is the unifying concept of the theories of fractals and chaos. A phenomenon that is self-similar looks the same or behaves the same when viewed at different degrees of magnification or different states and dimension. The dimension can be space or time. Self-similarity can be found like a coastline or triangle, and exact or geometric self-similarity can be found in firm, spiral, binary groups. Fractals in nature do no exhibit self-similarity over all time scales. Self-similarity eventually breaks down. And then continue to zoom in more and more, as you can see here. When we magnify the object, we see the same thing over and over again. This is self-similarity. And let's talk about fractal analysis. Fractals only tell us about an object in which a certain physical quantity is distributed evenly, where it's found in the embedding space. There are situations in which physical quantities are unevenly distributed over the space. That is, the distribution may not be homogeneous, and instead it's heterogeneous in the sense that the density of the content over the occupied region only are different. And the multi-fractal analysis specifically shows the distribution of scaling exponent for an object which is distributed heterogeneously. Equivalently, the multi-fractal spectrum provides a measure of how much the local regularity of an object varies in time. An object that is monofractal or just fractal exhibits essentially the same regularity everywhere in time and therefore has a multi-fractal spectrum with a narrow subcore. Conversely, a multi-fractal object exhibits variation in regularity over time and has a multi-fractal spectrum with wider subcore. Now let's go back to the brain. Let's just start with the Alzheimer disease. Is a study, we have the brain, and we have this. As you can see, during different stages of Alzheimer, we have shrinking of the white matter of the brain. So, in this study, we are interested to use fractal geometry to find different stages to see if we can discover different stages, or if we can classify different stages of Alzheimer's disease using our analytical technique. So let's start by some definitions. Human brain is the most dynamic and varied system of the body. Many such complex systems that exist in nonlinear dynamics are characterized by the fractal nature. The fractal dimension is a quantitative parameter that has been extensively used to analyze the complexity of the structural and functional patterns of the human brain. Alzheimer's disease is a progressive neurodegenerative disease that destroys memory and cognitive stage. Aging is the biggest risk factor for Alzheimer's disease. In some pathologies of the brain, such as Alzheimer's, epilepsy, and stroke, fractal dimension is altered. So fractal dimension in combination with other features is an emerging as a powerful diagnostic approach that can be used in clinical application. Here we can see the same patient in 2011 and 2015, and we want to use the fractal geometry to see if really we can classify these data from each other, if we can distinguish this patient is in 2011, this is stage of Alzheimer, and this one is a little bit older, 2015, can we use our analysis to classify and differentiate between them? Yes, we can do that. Our fractal and multi-fractal analysis successfully could distinguish these two different stages of Alzheimer. And the most important finding for this study was finding that during different stages of Alzheimer's disease, we have a decrease in fractal dimension or decrease in complexity of function of brain. And it's very important, not only for Alzheimer, but also for epilepsy or some other disease that they affect the white matter of the brain. We can use this technique to differentiate different stages when we have a shrinking or reducing the size of white matter brain. We have a decreasing complexity or fractal dimension of the brain. How about other neurodegenerative disease? We are interested to look at other disease. If we can use our analysis to really diagnose this type of disease, but it can be used as a diagnostic, like as a biomarker to diagnose this type of disease or not. So neurodegenerative diseases, they occur when nerve cells in the brain or peripheral nervous system, they lose function. So
Yes.
some of the
I'm gonna wait till this one's finished. I don't think I'm gonna watch it.
neurodegenerative disease.
Okay.
There are
Thank you for having No, this is-
no way.
I'm glad
to
the
slow
professor,
disease
I'm glad he
and
got
no
to
now.
talk to us. I think he wanted.
At first she wasn't there. We were outside and he was in and then we actually saw it.
Oh.
Three different diseases. Yeah, Parkinson, chicken subject, yeah, Parkinson.
Don't want him to feel like really.
Subjects. We are controlling with 16 healthy control subjects.
Okay.
So in the top part of this slide, in the right hand side, we can see the gait dynamics of these patients. In the first row, second row, and third row, and the last row is the control group of people, which is found in the last row. So the neurodegenerative disease influence significantly the gait behavior and the ability to move. To explore the etiology of neurodegenerative disease, it would be useful to characterize gait dynamics. So how we are going to characterize, we are going to use fractal geometry. And the purpose of this study is to classify different neurodegenerative disease using fractal geometry. In the bottom side of this slide, we use the multi-fractal analysis. And we notice that we have a different shape in multi-fractal spectrum for different disease. So it can be used definitely to find if there is a normal behavior or we have patients with different neurodegenerative disease. Although we could use this multi-fractal spectrum to differentiate between different diseases, but this is still unknown if we can use it as a diagnostic tool or not. Overall, the conclusion of this study was the result of paraspectral density revealed the presence of long-range self-similar correlations extending over steps in a scale free of fractal probability function. Using the multi-fractal analysis, we recognize a wide range of scaling exponents for some of the gait dynamics and a narrow range of scaling exponents for the other, which imply the presence of multi-fractality aligned with the fractality in gait dynamics. According to our fractal dimension analysis, figure fractal dimension may be utilized as a complexity measure for analyzing gait dynamics. According to our nonlinear analysis, the gait dynamics of fractal relationship in paraspectral domain, for which a larger number of scaling exponents are required to characterize the scaling structure. Although it was impossible to classify the healthy persons and the persons with brain disorders by vibration analysis or fractal dimension and multi-fractal analysis. And these nonlinear techniques, they fail to separate gait dynamics in different neurodegenerative disease, but they can be considered as a measure of complexity for the gait recordings, and they cover properties and may be used as indicators in general physical exam. So thanks to Mandelbrot and his masterpiece, the fractal geometry, we could use this technique to classify different neurodegenerative disease, especially his fractal dimension helped us to classify different stages of Alzheimer disease, and we found that during Alzheimer we have a reducing complexity of fractal dimension. Thank you so much for your attention.